Local and live, covering Franklin and Washington counties, it's Let's Talk Tristate with Tiny and Katie.
Welcome to Thursday's edition of Let's Talk Tri-State with Tiny and Katie. And it's all powered by Home Right Windows and Doors.
A lot of emphasis there.
The right choice.
Tiny and Katie.
Winner of the 2024 Best of the Tri-State. I was just feeling it with Tiny and Katie.
I like it too.
Today we're looking at some sunshine and it's going to be windy. Bundle up, gloves, hats, scarves, do all of it. The highest 34, but the wind chill, it's going to be intense. I think I saw gusts of wind up to 40 miles an hour, 48, something along those lines. Tonight, cloudy, breezy, low 25. Tomorrow, sunshine, high 34. Hello, winter. You have made your appearance.
What happened to that chance of snow you were talking about?
Last night?
A couple days ago. Wasn't there supposed to be a chance of snow?
Last night.
Was it last night?
Well, yesterday.
Okay.
There were some flurries, but it started at 70%, worked its way down to 50, and then I think
then
30.
It's windy.
Now it's just bitter cold.
Yeah.
The problem is, and you're not going to like this, my remote start's not working.
Why am I not going to like that?
Because I feel like I need to enlist you to help me figure out what's going on with it. It's just going to be a project we'll add to the list.
Maybe that's part of the problem with your wheel bearing.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Quick fun story. Tiny had to get work done to his wife's car yesterday, so he asked me to pick him up at the car dealership and take him to work. Car dealership's right down the street from my house. So I pick him up. We get 4 seconds into the ride. I mean, we weren't even
gas.
We weren't even at the end of the parking lot of the car dealership, and Tiny looks at me horrified and says, "Oh my gosh, Katie, what's that noise?" And I said, "The music."
Now, mind you, to give this some context here, Katie is typically very on her game when something happens. If something's not right, she has no problem letting me know and saying, "Tiny, can you look at this? Do you hear this? Do you see this?" Whatever the case may be. So imagine my surprise when this is not like this little it is a full-on, almost sounds like a jet engine in a wind tunnel. And when I say to her, "What's that noise?" It's almost like the noise.
I didn't know what you were talking about. I thought you were talking about the music.
I just could not, it was instantly in my head, I could not understand how you didn't hear it because it was so loud. It's almost like all the windows were down.
Well, after that happened, I said, "Noise," and Tiny was like, "You don't hear that?" And then I said, "Well, maybe it's the heat. Maybe I have the heat on too high because the heat makes noise." It was not the heat,
No,
nor was it the music.
So I tell her, pull in the sheets. We pull in, go and get coffee. I'm down on my hands and knees. I'm looking under the car because a few months ago you had this issue where a piece of your plastic trim was dropped down and it was dragging on the road, so it was naturally a grinding sound. You didn't catch it. I figured out what it was, fixed it, all good, saved money. So this time I'm thinking it's got to be the same thing because it did sound like a grinding. And I look, thinking it's repeated itself. No go. Okay, go to the back. Couldn't tell you. Don't see anything out of place. We get in the car. I said, "All right, just let's be quiet on the drive to the radio station. I need to be able to figure out where this is coming from."
I think that was really just a ploy to get me to stop talking. But
well, it was a challenge for you, I'm sure. So I'm able to deduce that it's coming from the rear. Whatever's happening is in the rear. We get to the radio station, have her pull around the parking lot a couple times and pass me. I can't figure out what's going on. And finally I said, I really think it's the wheel bearing because I can only hear it in the car. I don't hear it outside the car. Long and short of that is we have a wonderful service center across the street from the radio station. I said, "Katie, just take it across the street, see what they say." She comes back and she tells me, "Go ahead."
Okay.
What was it?
He calls me and he says, "Yes, ma'am, I have a hard time with this wording. Right, rear, wheel, bearing is bad."
Not just bad.
And, hang on. And I said, "Okay." And he says, "It's barely hanging on." And then he proceeds to say in a very nice way, he said, I was wondering as I was driving around, I kind of chuckled to myself, how did you not notice this sound? And I said, I don't know, I don't know. It just started small and then escalated and I just got used to the sound.
You know what I think it was? I think that if I had to defend you in court as to tell me, Katie, why did you not know? It sounded like just really loud road noise.
Well, it does. It didn't sound like a or like a grinding. It sounded like wind. So that to me, that's not a scary noise, an annoyance maybe. I don't know. But he said that it was moments away from falling off. And he absolutely told me not to drive it. He was like really concerned about it.
Yeah.
He said, he was like, I would not let anybody I know drive a car like this.
Yeah.
I'm going to replace it now. And it's very unsafe for you to continue driving around like this. But he said,
and you were lucky in that because who knows how long you would have or what could have happened.
Yeah.
But so just from a physical health standpoint, safety, right? But then go a step further to the financial, and you looked up what it would cost to do, because they say, according to what you read, that when you do one, you typically do all four, and he told you could do just the one because the other ones looked fine.
I guess that one just really took a beating, but the one, was over $300, so you get all four. There's over $1,200 for it, but I truly believe that if that hadn't happened, you saying that, I don't know, and I don't know what happens if they fall off. I don't know what happens to your steering or whatever, but
I think you run the risk of losing control. The wheel could come off, so there's an
accident, sure.
If you're going high speed, if you're going slow speed, still something.
Yeah, I think it was days away from happening. Yeah. He was very concerned when he told me about it. So the good news is someone's got my back, and I'm glad you were in the car and you pointed that out, and we got it fixed very quickly.
Yeah.
So he
did fix it yesterday.
He fixed it. I dropped it off at 9:30. I've never been a client there before. And I said, hi, my name is Katie. I work for the radio station. And they were listening to our sister station.
Well, I told you, because I've done a lot of business with them, so has my father. So I said, just go over there. They know us, tell them I work for the radio station.
And they were listening to one of our sister stations. And I said, oh, that's me on the radio. And I explained the situation. And he was like, yeah, I'll drive it around and I'll see what's going on. And then he called me an hour later. And he was just like, I don't know how this is even still on here. And he was telling me that the labor is dependent upon how long it takes. It could be 1 hour or 2 hours, depending on how hard it is to get that thing off. He was like, but I believe we're going to touch it and it's going to fall off.
Right. It's just barely hanging on.
And I'm like, so half hour of labor? What is that?
So no
$15, right? So actually I'm doing you guys a favor, if anything.
Well, I'm glad I'm giving you an easy job.
Yeah, so that was yesterday. Everything is fine in that situation, but man, I think car trouble is the most stressful situations. That's like the most stressful situation you can be in, because all you see and hear are dollar signs. That's it. It's never cheap to replace anything in the car.
That, and if you Google, you can get 20 different things it could be. And you're never going to know until you either have someone with you, and I'm not saying that was me, until you have someone with you who knows about cars and can pretty much diagnose on sound, or you take it to a garage. That's the only way you know. And if you do that, instantly, boom, money.
Yeah, I know. I'm just glad that everybody was on my side and we got that worked out. So let's talk quickly. Let me run through this day in history and why it is significant. It was 233 years ago in 1791 that Mozart died under mysterious circumstances at the age of, do you know how old he was? He was young.
23?
35.
Okay.
But that's young. But they think now it may have been a kidney infection. And 170 years ago, Aaron Allen patented a folding theater chair. Look how far we've come. Now you go to that one in Hagerstown and you can like full on, it's like a bed.
Heated seats now.
Oh, is it heated?
Yeah.
So do people bring in blankets and pillows and just take like a very expensive nap?
Yeah.
It was 56 years ago that this particular football player won the Heisman Trophy.
Namath?
Heisman is football, right?
Yeah, Heisman is college football, yes.
Yes.
56 years ago, well, I'm still going to go with Joe Namath, but...
O.J. Simpson.
Oh, okay.
And it was 40 years ago in 84 that Beverly Hills Cop was released. We are looking at 20 shopping days until Christmas, 26 days to... what's the New Year's Eve song? Auld Lang
Syne.
But why can't I get
Should
the tune?
all acquaintance be forgot?
What are they saying? Should all acquaintance?
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind?
Like people from the past?
Yeah, what it is Auld Lang Syne basically means days gone by, long time past. It's just a remembering type song. I don't know that it was ever really intended to be for New Year's, but that's just what it's used for.
I definitely have made up my own words to that song. I thought it was, should all acquaintance be forgot, and that's all I got. Mm-hmm. And then I would just do, and
Happy New Year!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think it's time to put a pause here and check in with the good word of the day.
Hi, this is Pastor Tim Beitzel from First Assembly of God in Shippensburg, PA. I have a devotional today based on Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24. Let me read those verses out of the New Living Translation. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path of everlasting life. Boy, doesn't that speak to all of us today, regardless of our path in life or even whether we are following Jesus. There are things that happen to all human beings in this life because we do live in an imperfect world. And David here is giving God permission to search his heart and to take out what doesn't belong there. And interesting that he includes anxious thoughts. God does not intend for us to live in anxiety and fear. If we give God permission to do all things that he wants to do in us, but first of all, he mentions to know my anxious thoughts. Wow, what an incredible thought that is, that God does not intend for us to live with anxiety. He goes on to say, point out anything in me that offends you. Wow. Isn't that something for us to think about today? In a world where it seems like everybody's offended at the least little thing, everybody seems to draw offense by everything, there's a real pandemic of a critical spirit going around. But listen, how about if we take the attitude before God that says, if there's anything in me that offends you, take it out. Good advice for us today. I invite you to check our church out at www.agshp.org. Looking forward to seeing you again real soon. God bless.
Sweets for the sweets,
Oh.
the holiday or any time. The Fairfield High School Class 2025 is selling cookies, cinnamon rolls, pretzel bites as a fundraiser. Oof. That is my name all over it. The order deadline is December 11th with the delivery date on the 19th, just in time for Christmas. Information can be obtained at the school. That is Fairfield High School Class of 2025. Cookies, cinnamon rolls, pretzel bites is the one that gets me the most.
And not to mention when you pair them with, in the sentence with cinnamon rolls and pretzel bites, they're like two of the best starches ever.
They are, and I love a good cinnamon roll. I'm very picky about when I eat them because they're so horrible for you. But I normally can't eat a whole one, and if I do, I have so much guilt. But pretzel bites, they just go down nice and easy. A little bit of carb. I mean, basically, they're good for you. But it's the
holidays. Do carbs really count?
You know what they do? I already am feeling it in my pants.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can see it in pants. But I tell you, speaking of cinnamon rolls, I don't know how I am able to exercise the willpower that I have for one thing, and that is that there's a Cinnabon in the Valley Mall.
Oh,
and
yes.
When you go in there, it's all you smell.
Is it in the food court?
No, it is
I didn't think so.
Right in front of Dick's and American Eagle at that end, up at Mission Barbecue.
There's
an
Annie Ann's over there too.
Well, there's Annie Ann's, that is center court. But then if you go up further, closer to Bath and Body Works, where it breaks off and you go up toward the food court, there's a kiosk right in the center there, and that's where they have.
It's the smell.
Oh,
it's this. That is.
But the thing is, it's not just. Yes, you're right, but they're good. They're great.
Of course. But there are certain places that when you walk in, the smell really gets you. For me, I have two. Actually, I probably have more than that. Subway. The smell of Subway gets me every time. If I walk into a Walmart and there's a Subway in there, it smells really good. And
to me, it does the opposite, the Subway smell. I don't like the Subway.
Oh my
It turns
gosh.
me off.
I'm not necessarily the biggest fan.
Okay.
But I don't eat a lot of subs.
Right.
But the smell is just amazing. And it's either I think it's Jimmy John's. They're freshly baked bread.
Yeah.
That smell.
Yeah,
and again, it's not something I eat regularly because I'm not a sub person. But the smell of the bread just gets me.
I'm wondering what mine. It's obviously Cinnabon. Annie Ann's is another one. That's just, and there's the Walmart in Waynesboro. I don't know if you know this.
Oh, I know.
Has Cinnabon. Has Annie Ann's and Subway.
I know. I've seen them. It's right off to the right as you walk in.
Did I ever tell you the story about Annie Ann's at that one? We always get them.
Does this have to do with your daughter?
Yeah, and how there was one of the what do you call them? The hot dogs in which she gets. So they have the cinnamon bites.
I know you told me the story, but
and I'm telling you, it was amazing. We order them almost every time we go in there. She gets them either on the way in or on the way out. This time it was on the way in. She eats down at the very bottom, and she's like, "Okay, I'm done." And I see down in there's one of their pretzel dogs
that just
little mini
accidentally
dogs.
Made its way in.
Yeah, that was in this thing, but it's now at this point covered in
cinnamon
and sugar. And I look at Mary and I said, "Do you see this?" And she goes, "Oh my!" I'm like, I don't think that this is going to be the negative thing you think. I said, I have very high hopes for this. And I'm telling you, Katie, it is the day that someone at Annie Ann's corporate realizes what they could do with those things is the day life as we know it changes.
Wow.
It was so good.
That is a bold statement.
I cannot even tell you how good it was. I was so good, I wanted to walk over and say, look, guys, here's what just happened. All right. And wait for them to be like, oh, we're so sorry. I'm like, oh, no. I'd like an order of that.
Right.
Please
I'm sure they would.
They would.
Yeah, of course.
I bet they would. Like, has anybody ever told y'all that you need to do this now?
I would partner those two things together for sure.
Oh, that was so good. Unbelievably good.
Did you tell me anything?
I didn't tell you a news story.
Okay.
That doesn't count, but it could be.
Do you want to save it or shall we go into it?
No, let's do it.
All right.
So spurred in part by a 13.5% area of growth this year, officials with the Hagerstown Regional Airport are adding 18 additional flights between mid-May and September. These will improve travel to those heading to Myrtle Beach, St. Pete, Clearwater, and Orlando Sanford.
I thought Charlotte was one of the ones that they added. Or maybe they were already servicing Charlotte.
I like that they're doing this because my biggest qualm with, and we talked about this not long ago, with the Hagerstown Airport, is that it's very nice if you want to head down like a Friday or even a Saturday. If you wanted a quick down and back trip, like I told you, Hulk Hogan has his shop at one of their destinations. But it's the return flight that you can't get back in until either if you don't go on Saturday afternoon, you got to wait until about Tuesday to go. And I don't want to. I just want to go down and back.
Well, I wish I would have known about Myrtle a couple weeks ago. I was down there.
It's true.
And I took a flight from Reagan down there. It would have been nice to just go right from Hagerstown.
Yep.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at news and sports with Andy, and it's all powered by WellSpan, winner of the American Hospital Association's Quest for Quality Award, online at wellspan.org.
Local and live, covering Franklin and Washington counties, it's Let's Talk Tri-State with Tiny and Katie.
Joining us on Let's Talk Tri-State now, we have Mr. Randy Weckerly. He is the author of Adam's Miracle. Randy, how are you?
I am very good.
We thank you for joining us today, making time. We typically would have Randy on video, but both of us are having some computer issues, so we have a nice picture, a beautiful picture here of Randy, just so you have an idea of what he looks like. But the topic today is identifying a miracle, the power of faith, resolve, and determination to save your son. And as in Randy, your son, Adam, and we're going to break into that. Randy's website, he has two of them. One is thedistillerychannel.com. The other is liveecostyle.com. That's LIVEECO style.com. Randy, first take us through your history. We'll get to the story of Adam, but let's go back in the story that is Randy Weckerly and walk us up to a certain point where Adam's story kicks in, and then we'll break into that.
Okay, well, I've been very blessed to have a multifaceted career, but I had a 24-year career with Mutual of Omaha. Had Northern Illinois, a lot of great clients and really wonderful company. And in 1978, they asked me to be on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, which was a big show at the time.
Yes, it was.
And I knew nothing about media, and they sort of picked me out and they said, hey, do you want to be the commercial guy to be on there with Marlon Perkins? So that, along with that insurance career, met a lot of people. And the reason I mention that is that as it's spun forward, as the insurance industry changed in 96, You look around and you say, okay, where am I going to go now? Because they closed most of their offices. Excuse me. And I said, boy, the fun thing I did was media. I didn't know anything about it other than being on it. So went down that path in the world of golf. I knew that a little bit. So it ended up being that I invented some things for golf, but it introduced me to a lot of great people. But being in the athletics, I have 4 great sons, and Adam being my 4th. It was just in my career, I was just very, very blessed, being faith-based, taught fundamentally and spiritually. I think it was a gift from God in my youth, and walking the fairways, playing a lot of competitive golf. I always had a daily connection to the good Lord and what he produced in front of me. Of course, when my son got sick, a lot of those things added up to helping him being saved.
Absolutely. We're talking with Randy Weckerly. He's the author of Adam's Miracle, the Identifying a Miracle, the Power of Faith, Resolve, and Determination to Save Your Son. Randy, I can certainly relate to what you just said. I grew up in a faith-based household. My father is, as a matter of fact, he's a minister, and just having that, I often say, and this is something I probably would have otherwise gotten to after we hear the story of Adam and you, but it's difficult for me to understand how people can make it in the world without faith, because I know how hard it is to make it with it. And it's that in and of itself could be considered miraculous, that you can just survive this without knowing and feeling and believing that the good Lord above is here and watching. And you certainly can attest to that. Let's go to Adam's story and your determination to save him, and how the power of faith helped you get there, and how you identify this, and I fully believe it, as a miracle. I have heard bits and pieces of this story, read bits and pieces, but let's hear it from you. You're here on Let's Talk Tri-State. You have the floor, sir. Would you take us through the story of you and Adam?
Yeah, and please allow me, one of the questions that a lot of people ask, it happened in 2005, why did I write it in 2023? Mm-hmm. It never gets away from me. I had PTSD at the end of it, and I'll get to that, why that happens. But my son Adam in November of 2005 played 2 basketball games on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. He was captain of the basketball team, played great. There were so many miracles in this book. I typically am not home on a Saturday night, but I certainly always followed my son playing basketball. Saturday night, I was actually supposed to be on that night in Ireland, celebrating a thing of business, which we stayed home. I typically am not awake at 11:30 when all this began on a Saturday night, but as the book begins, we're sitting in our living room and all we hear is a thumping on the wall, and my wife and I at the time can't understand what's going on. And we're going, where's that coming from? And we got up, and it is my son in the lower bathroom pounding on the wall, and I had to knock down the door, and he was having a grand mal seizure. Had no idea who was sick. Played 2 basketball games hours before. On the floor now, for lack of a better term, throwing up, and we had to, first of all, save his life to clear that, and he almost died before the ambulance got there. So it begins on this evening, and you can't understand that within seconds of sleeping in a big easy chair, now you have your son in your lap, and the ambulance trying to find a way to get the cot in the door, and trying to explain to them, no, he doesn't do drugs. This has nothing to do with that. And I have no idea what it is. And then from there, so that's a Saturday. Short version is they fly him to a regional hospital 2 days later. On that Monday night, basically, we were told that he has viral encephalitis, prepare for the worst. And a day later, he had last rites. Wow. And 2 days later, he was told, and again, I had the ability to read CAT scans and MRIs, and the virus had set in. They'd gone through so many different determinations. He almost passed in the MRI, but they determined he had viral encephalitis, which is an infection of the brain. He was just so tough. He was a state athlete throwing the discus and running the 400 in the spring the year before, but his distances were going down months before, and we couldn't understand it. But what happened is that he had mono that we didn't know, And playing basketball, of course, in the beginning of the year, you're doing all the drills and, extending your body. And he was just so tough. He played through it, honestly. And, but his body had taken the toll, and it
No, we've
had
heard. I'm sorry
transferred.
to interrupt you, Randy, but when I never had mono, but I used to work in the education system, and inevitably about one child a year would sadly come down with mono, and I mean that child. The stories I heard were, I mean, it just puts you down. You think the flu's bad, and then you get mono. So the fact that Adam was even able to be upright with having mono is amazing.
Well, it is, and it was for months, and that's just who he is, and he's such a great kid. I said, the baby of my 4 wonderful sons, and you just can't understand it, but you can understand 105-degree temperature. You can understand that his mom and dad, and we came together as, we were divorced, not the greatest of divorce, but we immediately got together to save our son. Both she and I are faith-based, but coming from different, you'll read in the book, we're somewhat different in our approach to medicine. And but the thing was, then on that Saturday or that Thursday, is that the doctors came to me and they said, I know you know how to read CAT scans and MRIs. Here's his brain. It's milky white. Turn him off. Let him go. Say goodbye. And it's devastating. And his mom was not there, and I could read the CATs and the MRIs, and I know that was the thing. So I went into his room, and this is where the book began, is that basically to go in and say goodbye to a son that's a grappling athlete that you're holding on to with no sleep for 5 days, is that the nurse in there simply said, Mr. Weckerly, your son is big and strong. Miracles happen. And I said, I think you're an angel from God.
Amen.
And I said, I'm going to go with that. And I raised my palm skyward and I said, Lord, I've never asked for anything, ever. All I've done is given thanks. But if you give me my son back, I'll pay it forward. And as the goal of the book was to get my son home and just to take it a minute by minute. So I took some blue medical tape and put it on the door jamb, and I went outside, and the 3 doctors who I highly respected for the treatment of my son were standing there, and they said, well, what's going on? And I said, well, treat my son as if he's going to sit up 30 days from now and say thank you. You can kill him with drugs, but keep him alive. I think the good Lord just spoke to me through this angel in the room, and I believe that we're going to save my son. I'm not going to let him go.
Wow.
And that's when the fight began.
Yeah. So it's so moving so far in this story now. I'm assuming that you still, all these years later, because you said you still, wrestle with this. This is still something that you think about. And the one thing that stuck out to me was, as a parent myself, a 4-year-old daughter, and she's my only child, what stuck out to me was when the doctor basically told you that this is it. It's time to say goodbye. I would imagine that doctor's voice and what he said still echoes to you today.
Without question.
Yeah.
And in fact, they reinforced it when I went outside, talked to him. They said the best thing that could happen if your son woke up. And remember, these are their words, and I can remember just like it happened yesterday. The book was written from notes, but the memories were still there daily, all those years later. But they said if he wakes up, the best thing it could be is that he would be vegetative, maybe live for 3 years in a wheelchair, live in a hospice situation. The area of his brain that was affected is his global thinking area. He's not there anymore, Mr. Weckerly. And I said, I'm telling you, I'm not going to let my son go.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times we're talking with Randy Weckerly. He's the author of Adam's Miracle. Today's topic is identifying a miracle, the power of faith, resolve, and determination to save your son. And I think that when we hear a story like this, Randy, faith is one of those things. My father always told me, he would say, faith is, easier said than put into practice. And it's very true. We often say sometimes, and even as believers, we're guilty of this, is will say, I believe God will do this, or it's in the Lord's hands. And I think sometimes we just kind of pass that off, and that's just what we say. Whereas you really have to put in the work, because faith without works, you have to. The Bible says to pray without ceasing, which I'm sure that you did. So now, Randy, take us through the next step. So now you have informed the doctors that you are going to see this through. You're going to pray for your son. You're going to be with your son. And whatever it takes, they need to treat him as if he's going to wake up, as you told them, in 30 days. So you said that's where the fight begins. That's where you left off. And take us the rest of the way, Randy.
Well, what happens at that point in time is that the brain is swelling. So how it swells is that's what kills them. Mm-hmm. And the brain swells and the stem of the brain pops through the back and they're gone. So it's a constant trying to drain their body, honestly, of fluid at that point in time. And there was one time his blood pressure, he crashed. His blood pressure went down to 45/25. Wow. And that's when you're done. Mm-hmm. And the doctor looked me in the eyes, and now I have to remember this is after I had to hold on to my son for 8.5 days by his bed, because they would have let him go if I would have gone to sleep. The nurses told me that later, but I felt that, and I wasn't going to let my son go.
Well, now Randy, I'm sorry, just to interject here. What you're saying with that is that the doctors basically would have, in doing their due course, I would assume you're not suggesting any malice here, obviously, but that if they would have walked in a room cold like that, and your son could have been going through what he was going through, then it would have been we're just going to call it. We're correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what happened when he crashed in the room. They allowed me to go in the crash room, because again, being a Mutual of Omaha, I've been around medical situations all my life. Of course, I had called Cleveland Clinic and Mayo's and all my connections down in Houston and Mutual of Omaha, all my friends in medical during the past. In fact, I had a sister-in-law who's a neurologist, and called everybody when this all began, and they all said, well, I hate to tell you, your son's going to die. And all of them said the same thing. And there was no chance that he's going to live. And, so you just say, well, that's nice, but we're going to continue. And what happens is that your body is in this viral state where it raises the temperature, where his mom and I were constantly bathing him. The heating area of his brain that heats and cools you was shot. So he had a cooling blanket under him and a heating blanket on top. It was the strangest things that had to be taken into consideration. And the nurses were fabulous. And, noise. And so one night, in the book, we talk about my mother coming. She was a very calming aspect, and we had to put in his brain to figure out the pressure in his brain because of the swelling. So it's called an intracranial pressure device, ICP, and they drill into the brain to measure it. And you and I sitting here, our intracranial pressure is about 5. Okay, that's just normal. When they put it in the first time, his was 16.
Oh my!
Which is awful. Unfortunately, sometimes it got to 65.
Wow!
And they would look at it and say, "This is impossible. This is ridiculous." But my mom walked into the room, and he's in a coma at this time. They induced a coma. The only way that they felt they could save him, so they induced him, put him in a deep, deep coma, shut everything down in his body. He's on 17 drugs. He had 17 different pierces, and he still has the scars in his hands, both hands, from all the drugs that were in him at the same time. And you sit there, and again, it's just all about this cooling and this up and down and up and down and up and down, minute by minute, day by day, hour by hour. And it went on for days. It went on for, the first time he sort of stabilized was about the 10th day. But when my mom came over about the 8th or 9th day and walked in the room and started talking to him, the ICP went from like 22 down to 12. I was like, well, what? Wait. Because it was right at the head of his bed. It was a constant monitor. And I said, Mom, talk to him. And she did. And it went down further. And then all of a sudden I realized, I had heard that when you're in a coma, they can still hear you.
Right.
So I knew that somebody was still there. So when she left, I started singing his lullaby that I sang to him when he was very young. He was very sick for weeks. He had croup and really, really terribly sick at a young age. And I just started humming that and saying the Lord's Prayer time and time and time again, constantly, as we were trying to find these calm moments to try to calm it down. And we found out that when I did that, sung that lullaby, the very simplest of lullabies, is that his ICP would come down. I knew my son was in there.
Yeah. Randy, we're going to, if you could, stick around with us for a few minutes. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back. We're talking with Randy Weckerly. He's the author of Adam's Miracle. Identifying a Miracle is the topic today on Let's Talk Tri-State. Online, you can find him at liveecostyle.com and the Distillery Channel. And Randy will be back with us in just a few minutes on Let's Talk Tri-State to tell us the conclusion, and some may say the beginning, of the story of Adam's recovery and the miracle that happened to Randy Weckerly. We'll be back in just a few.
Sweets for the sweets,
Oh.
the holiday or any time. The Fairfield High School Class 2025 is selling cookies, cinnamon rolls, pretzel bites as a fundraiser. Oof. That is my name all over it. The order deadline is December 11th with the delivery date on the 19th, just in time for Christmas. Information can be obtained at the school. That is Fairfield High School Class of 2025. Cookies, cinnamon rolls, pretzel bites is the one that gets me the most.
And not to mention when you pair them with, in the sentence, with cinnamon rolls and pretzel bites, they're two of the best starches ever.
They are, and I love a good cinnamon roll. I'm very picky about when I eat them because they're so horrible for you, but I normally can't eat a whole one, and if I do, I have so much guilt. But pretzel bites, they just go down nice and easy. A little bit of carb. I mean, basically, they're good for you.
But it's the holidays. Do carbs really count?
You know what they do? I already am feeling it in my pants.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can see it in pants. But I tell you, speaking of cinnamon rolls, I don't know how I am able to exercise the willpower that I have for one thing, and that is that there's a Cinnabon in the Valley Mall.
Oh,
and
yes.
When you go in there, it's all you smell.
Is it in the food court?
No, it is
I didn't think so.
Right in front of Dick's and American Eagle at that end, up at Mission Barbecue.
There's
a kiosk.
an Annie Ann's over there too.
Well, there's Annie Ann's, that is center court. But then if you go up further, closer to Bath and Body Works, where it breaks off and you go up toward the food court, there's a kiosk right in the center there, and that's where they have.
It's the smell.
Oh,
it's this. That is.
And but the thing is, it's not just. Yes, you're right, but they're good. They're great.
Of course. But there are certain places that when you walk in, the smell really gets you. For me, I have two. Actually, I probably have more than that. Subway. The smell of Subway gets me every time. If I walk into a Walmart and there's a Subway in there, it smells really good. And
to me, it does the opposite, the Subway smell. I don't like the Subway.
Oh my gosh.
It turns me off.
I'm not necessarily the biggest fan, but I don't eat a lot of subs.
Right.
But the smell is just amazing. And it's either I think it's Jimmy John's. They're freshly baked bread.
Yeah.
That smell.
Yeah,
and again, it's not something I eat regularly because I'm not a sub person. But the smell of the bread just gets me.
I'm wondering what mine. It's obviously Cinnabon. Annie Ann's is another one. That's just, and there's the Walmart in Waynesboro. I don't know if you know this.
Oh, I know.
Has Cinnabon. has Annie Ann's and Subway.
I know. I've seen them. It's right off to the right as you walk in.
Did I ever tell you the story about Annie Ann's at that one? We always get them.
Does this have to do with your daughter?
Yeah, and how there was one of the, what do you call them? The hot dogs in which she gets. So they have the cinnamon bites.
I know you told me the story, but.
And I'm telling you, it was amazing. We order them almost every time we go in there. She gets them either on the way in or on the way out. This time it was on the way in. She eats down at the very bottom, and she's like, "Okay, I'm done." And I see down in there's one of their pretzel dogs
that just
little mini
accidentally
dogs.
Made its way in.
Yeah, that was in this thing, but it's now at this point covered in cinnamon and sugar. And I look at Mary and I said, "Do you see this?" And she goes, "Oh my!" I'm like, "I don't think that this is going to be the negative thing you think." I said, "I have very high hopes for this," and I'm telling you, Katie, it is the day that someone at Annie Ann's corporate realizes what they could do with those things is the day life as we know it changes.
Wow.
It was so good.
That is a bold statement.
I cannot even tell you how good it was. I was so good, I wanted to walk over and say, "Look, guys, here's what just happened." All right? And wait for them to be like, "Oh, we're so sorry." I'm like, "Oh, no. I'd like an order of that."
Right.
please just do that.
I'm sure they would.
They would.
Yeah, of course.
I bet they would. Like, has anybody ever told y'all that you need to like do this now?
I would partner those two things together for sure.
Oh, that's so good. So unbelievably good.
Did you tell me anything?
I didn't tell you a news story.
Okay.
That doesn't count, but it could be.
Do you want to save it or shall we go into it?
No, let's do it.
All right.
So spurred in part by a 13.5% area of growth this year, officials with the Hagerstown Regional Airport are adding 18 additional flights between mid-May and September. These will improve travel to those heading to Myrtle Beach, St. Pete, Clearwater, and Orlando Sanford.
I thought Charlotte was one of the ones that they added. Or maybe they were already servicing Charlotte.
I like that they're doing this because my biggest qualm with, and we talked about this not long ago, with the Hagerstown Airport, is that it's very nice if you want to head down like a Friday or even a Saturday. If you wanted a quick down and back trip, like I told you, Hulk Hogan has his shop at one of their destinations, but it's the return flight that you can't get back in until like either if you don't go on Saturday afternoon, you got to wait until about Tuesday to go. And I don't want to. I just want to go down and back.
Well, I wish I would have known about Myrtle a couple weeks ago. I just was down there.
It's true.
And I took a flight from Reagan down there. It would have been nice to just go right from Hagerstown.
Yep.
WellSpan, winner of the American Hospital Association's Quest for Quality Award, online at wellspan.org.
Local and live, covering Franklin and Washington counties, it's Let's Talk Tri-State with Tiny and Katie.
We're back on Let's Talk Tri-State. We have Randy Weckerly with us. He is the author of Adam's Miracle. Today's topic is identifying a miracle. Online, thedistillerychannel.com and liveecostyle.com is where you can find Randy and all of his resources and materials. And so far, Randy, you've taken us through the story of how Adam, you and your wife found him having a grand mal seizure in the bathroom, the basement in that area, and get him to the hospital. The doctors give you the news that basically it's time to say goodbye, and you refused. You told them to treat him as if he was going to wake up in 30 days. And right before the break, you said how his intracranial pressure was basically sky high. Your mom was talking to him. It started to go down. Then you spoke to him, and you sang his lullaby that you sang to him years ago when he was younger. It began to go down even further. So take us from there then.
Well, now I was convinced that he was in there. I mean, there's no logic and sense,
right,
that would happen. So he sort of stabilized over the next few days. And again, it was, he'd sleep by the bed and sort of takes turns. But I went down, they had a library, and I went down and I started reading about EEGs, what it meant, the brain waves that, they treat people and they put it on their head.
Randy, can I ask you a question here? I'm sorry, I meant to ask this a minute ago. Along these, as the pressure is coming down, and it's obviously a result of first and foremost God's hand and healing power, but by way of you singing this lullaby to him, at this point are the doctors saying to you, because I've heard this before, well, don't put any hope in that because it could be a rally, or are they saying that's good if we can keep that going? What are the doctors? What's the messaging that you're getting from them?
Absolutely what you just said. They looked at me, and there was one of the doctors, and all three were great. They just came on different shifts. And the one that was there that evening, after I could see this happening, I went to his station. He was doing some reports, and I said, Doc, I said, pull out that chart on my son. I said, the diagnosis is correct. Change the prognosis.
Oh.
Change to recovery. Mm-hmm. We're treating him to recover. And I said, I'm going to be adamant about it. I said, the attitude when you walk in there, I want it to be all positive. I said, we'll carry the faith. But I said, I know right now, I said, this is going to be a daily fight, but I'm not going to let my son go. Don't tell me. Don't bring that negativity to me. Mm-hmm. But they were great. I mean, they were just trying to be rational about it.
Right.
So this went on. I mean, there would be days that you'd walk the halls, you'd get a break, you'd stabilize. And this went on for 3.5 weeks. And you sit there and you don't know what's happening. It just, every day is the same. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And of course, online, kids were trying to find out. Adam was a very engaging, a lot of friends. They literally let the high school have prayer sessions for him, which is really not ever happens. Mm-hmm. Prayer chains and communities were set up that we found out about later. But it wasn't a feeling. It was just that saying the Lord's Prayer in the simplest of terms, thousands and thousands of times, and trying to engage and, for solace and determination and being connected to my faith. I just felt I wasn't going to let my son go. It's just not going to happen. So about 3.5 weeks later, they come to us and they said, he can't stay in this coma forever because all these drugs are turning his blood to what we call blood sludge. Because they've taken all the water out that they can. And they have to now try to bring him up, try to bring him out of the coma, see what we have. And that's
when you get to that point, when they say, Mr. Weckerly, we need to, it's one or the other. We either try to bring him out or we still say goodbye. What are his vitals looking like at that time? Is that what naturally they would be doing if they see these vitals working that way, or where are we at there?
Well, they had to, because what was happening was his liver was shutting down, his major organs were shutting down, his blood, because of lack of hydration, was literally turning to sludge, and all the chemicals they had in him, the pain drugs and the stimulants, and 17 drugs literally every day being pumped into him.
Right.
And you get to that point and you sit and say, okay, well, here's the hurdle. We can't leave him here. He will die. So we have to bring him up. And of course, the things that you now have with that, he's been intubated and the lungs are full of junk, for lack of a better term. You don't know if he's going to go into seizures, because remember, the brain, he's been having seizures all this time. So they've been, trying to keep those dialed down because the brain, was infected. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, they decided, well, we got to bring him out. And it was about the 17th or 18th of December, about 3.5 weeks later. And the first attempt was terrible. He came up and went right back into seizure. So they had to put him right back down again. Within minutes. So you go, wow, that didn't go out good. So the next day they tried it again, and it actually started to go well. And we sat there and, both Jenny and I were like, wow, But he had stabilized health-wise, so what we were going to get, now he had been to the point where, physically, yes, he still had the major organs were failing, but, glimpses of hope started hitting the horizon. And they said, well, we're going to start bringing him up. And so this is the hardest part for me. 4:32 in the morning, they had hospital rooms, and Ginny and I had separate rooms, but at 4:32 in the morning, the nurse who was in charge called both of us and they said, how would you like to come down and say hello to your son? Because he woke up, could see, could talk, communicate. He was fully intubated, had no idea what had hit him, had no idea why he's in a bed. And this nurse was holding on to him as we're running down the hallway. And
you probably, Randy, I'd follow along with your story here. Excuse me. Saying when the set it up by saying this is the hard part, and you're thinking the nurse comes in and is probably, and we know Adam's is with us, and obviously the topic today is Adam's miracle. But I got to be honest with you, I thought the nurse was going to come in and say, this is really it. You need to say goodbye. But how wonderful it was that it was completely the opposite. That's wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, it was like we didn't know when it was going to happen. But, and again, you have to understand, for me, there are two hard parts in this book. This was not hard, but certainly it's very difficult for me still to talk about today. And you walk into this room, and Adam has this magnetic smile. And he was there.
Wow.
And you feel you made it. And from that point on, what happened was there were still some hurdles. Now, he had lost 64 pounds.
Wow.
Because they couldn't put anything in him, obviously. They were just trying to, so he was very gaunt, He's trying to get his bearings. He recognized mom and dad. He had vision. He could communicate. his hands work. You don't know what part of his body might not work.
Right.
But he's got the stick down his throat, from the intubation, he can't talk. But, he was there. Now, a couple highlights, 2-3 days later, they have to take the intubation out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. When you do that, that's very serious, because now it's sort of like launching the lunar module.
Right.
You're cutting it loose from Apollo 13. There's no going back. And so that was a big day. We all got around the bed and we all prayed and held hands. And you think that's a long procedure, and the nurse comes in and goes, "Nope, whoop, it's out." But the only problem is that his lungs are just full of mucus and everything else. So the horrible part now is you got to get all that out. I mean, there were some horrible things he had to go through, but I mean, it's all through going toward being cured.
Right. And of course, I believe if I understanding things correctly from pneumonia is a risk at this point. Is that correct?
It is. Everything's a risk. I mean,
Right.
everything. I mean, the people that were around, everybody wanted to come in and see, touch, and feel, of course, and
not to mention too is that this is just the massive, unbelievable step of him coming out of this, and then now it's any little thing could completely derail it along the way. Now you feel
it's documented in the book. There were 2 times 2 things happened. Here the miracle in the book is daily, and this is the thing. That's the reason we chronicled the way it is that it's highlight. I put in there, here's another miracle. What happens is, so the miracle is he wakes up. The miracle is he recognizes this. The miracle is he gets intubated and he sits up in bed. And the miracle is now his brain is still fried. He's still a little disoriented. Yeah. Okay. But he can communicate. He can remember words. He can remember the past. Nothing was lost. He could, again, we know he's going to need rehab,
right.
A lot of different kinds of rehab. And this is on about the 21st of December of that year. And, he wanted to go for a ride around the hospital. We put him in a wheelchair and we take him down to the commissary, and he wants to have spaghetti and milk, because he's hungry. And we're going like, you can't have it, because the gastroenterologist said no. And the gastroenterologist came in that night, and you talk about being in the high of the mountain, and the gastroenterologist comes in that night and says, "Well, I hate to tell you this, his organs are still failing. He can't eat anything. He's not out of the woods yet."
Right.
He's awake, but not out of the woods. And we're like, God, that was a gut punch.
Yeah.
And you sit and say, Lord, where do we go from here? And you pray a lot and pray a lot and pray a lot. And again, the miracle happens again. The next day, the gastroenterologist comes in and says, "This makes no sense, but all his numbers are correct."
Wow.
He can eat anything he wants. And he says, "This makes no sense. This never happened." And we said, "Well, what about spaghetti and milk?" So 2 days later, now we're up to Christmas Eve. My first day to go back home, because I lived about 40, 50 miles from where the hospital was where we were, happened to be Christmas Eve. And my wife at the time, my current wife at the time, it was the first day we got to go home, change clothes after 20 some odd days.
We haven't talked about I understand that for roughly, how many days did you just say, Randy?
Well, now you're into about 30 days.
Okay. So for 30 days, by the way, we're talking with Randy Weckerly, the author of Adam's Miracle. The topic today on Let's Talk Tri-State is identifying a miracle. Randy can be found online at liveecostyle.com and thedistillerychannel.com. And please, I encourage everyone to go to those websites and find Randy's book and get it. It'll be you're getting a very great synopsis here today. But what we haven't talked about, Randy, is, and I know that your life for these 30 days, while Adam has been obviously, the prognosis is bleak, and you make your determination that you are going to trust in the power of prayer and the power of healing, and all the way through. But we haven't touched on the other things in life that are going on. Randy. Adam's your youngest, so you have 3 other sons. You have a wife. You have a family of all of these things, which I'm sure all were understanding of what you're going through. But you just said, and it reminded me, it's Christmas Eve. You finally get to go home. Had you even decorated for Christmas? I know that seems like a crazy thought, but we we take these things for granted, that life, life is continuing all around us when we're in these tragedies and these trials, and obviously our focus is where it should be, but, kind of touch on the ancillary things, if you would.
Well, I had ruthless partners. I was a philanthropic doing big projects, and I had my own company with partners in it, and they decided at the time to come in, and because I was not available to work and they were ruthless, they took my company away from me. They voted me out, and that was okay. Except when I went to the bank to check in to see how my bank accounts were, all the bank knew me, and they kept paying my company bills even though I wasn't part of it. And so I ended up with a lot of debt that it took me 14 years to pay off, that ex-partners. So getting out of the hospital, I had no job, I had no career, but I had my son. I didn't really care.
Right. Yep.
Decorating for Christmas, obviously hadn't been home. Our first thing was Christmas Eve, we're going to church. Got a shower, got some clothes on. And I asked the priest, I said, do you mind if I say thank you? Because their prayers worked. And we were allowed to do that. And after church, of course, we weren't cooking or anything, but there's a great Chinese restaurant where we're very close to, we know is going to be open. We know the owners. And we went over there to have our first real meal in a month. And Joanne and I were there, and people from church followed. And it was on Christmas Eve. And just to come over and hug.
Yeah.
And be part of, wow, what's been going on. So it's just quite remarkable, because the community itself, when we went back, there's a pizza place we ate, and Adam wanted his spaghetti and milk. So the owner of the pizza place that we've known for 30 years went in, handmade it, handed it off to one of my other sons, drove down to get it. So Christmas Day, we had spaghetti and milk with the family hanging around.
And it was probably the best Christmas meal you've ever had.
Yep, the pictures are in the book. And we're all standing around this gaunt kid, and we're all worn out, but joyous. And then you know what they say? Well, your son's got to be transferred to RIC, Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, and he's going to be there for probably 6 months to a year for his rehab. Well, when does that happen? Oh, tomorrow, 26th of December.
Wow.
Now, this part we'll go into, because this is truly where the miracle unfolds. Remember, my goal was to get him home.
Right. Randy, actually,
goal.
can we, you know what?
Yeah.
Can we take another break here?
Yeah.
Because we're sticking with this. This is, I feel like I am there's something that I think anyone needs to hear in this, and certainly me as well. So we're talking with Randy Weckerly. He's the author of Adam's Miracle, and we're gonna have we'll be able to finish out the rest of this story here in just a few minutes on Let's Talk Tri-State. So we will be right back.
Well, get that mullet growing.
Uh-oh.
The
Why?
Pennsylvania
Morgan Wallen lookalike contest?
I mean, something along those lines. The Pennsylvania Farm Show will host its second annual mullet contest January 6th. Participants can sign up at 11 a.m. with the contest kicking off at 11:30. This is obviously a very quirky competition, and it celebrates the iconic hairstyle with categories for all ages. There will also be a throwback category for those who can submit a photo of their mullet from before 2010. I remember I think there's a national level mullet competition. Last year, it was a kid who won, and he was from somewhere in Pennsylvania. I want to say Allentown. It was somewhere that was relatively close. Had this insane mullet. I mean, that you have to really be committed to have a mullet like that.
Business in the front, party in the back.
Have you ever had a mullet?
No, closest I ever had was a rat tail.
Ew.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. Was the whole head shaved with just that in the back?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was awful. Looking back.
Yeah.
And it was the thing was it was my mother who got tired of it, who didn't like it. I was obviously very attached to it, pardon the pun. But I remember Donnie, distinctly remember West End Barbershop in Hagerstown. I was always tell Donnie, be careful about my rat tail, and he's like, yeah, I got it. And then come to find out, the one time Mom gave him a signal like it's time to let that go. So he cut. I didn't know it when he did it. So and it was something that I would play with. So I would get back, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And I tell my mother, and of course she blamed him. Saying, I bet Donnie. Well, Donnie's getting old. He just must have.
So when did it come out that she told him to do that?
Oh, it was years later.
Oh, sounds like a hairy
It
situation.
was a hairy situation. But I don't even remember that I was that upset about it.
I would hope not. You should have been celebrating.
Well, but from that moment, like I may have been, I think because she blamed it on him, who did I really have to get upset with other than him? And he was very intimidating, so I wasn't going to do anything, say anything to him. Not to mention I was 10 or so. But, but I don't remember ever really being that upset about it.
Wow.
Yeah. But I can't believe I did that looking back.
Yeah, I'm upset that you did that.
It was
How long was it?
I'd say probably about that long.
Ugh.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, bad.
Well, Santa's Little Helpers, more specifically members of the Waynesboro Rotary Club and Beta Sigma Phi sorority, swept into the city's Walmart on Sunday on an impromptu mission. They were armed with detailed wish lists as they searched for baby dolls, basketballs, games, puzzles, and art supplies to make the holiday special. The helpers will meet again later to wrap gifts before Santa's big day. And like I told you, I believe it was a couple days ago, how over the weekend I ran into Donnie from Smithsburg, and they were doing their Shop with the Cop at the Waynesboro Walmart. And it's so good to see, so good to hear about all of these events that take place to help those less fortunate and put gifts under the tree for kids.
And I think it's great that we've talked to so many of these people about these events, and now seeing them come to fruition and seeing it in the news, like, oh yeah, I remember we just talked about that, and just spreading so much holiday cheer.
It really warms your heart.
Speaking of spreading cheer,
Andy does that daily.
did you like that?
I like that.
I was waiting for you to look at me and say that was terrible, which you didn't.
Here I thought you were going to pause and be like, yeah, that wasn't that great.
Speaking of spreading holiday cheer, more of Let's Talk Tri-State coming up next.
Local and live, covering Franklin and Washington counties, it's Let's Talk Tri-State with Tiny and Katie.
And we're back, and we are going to be wrapping up our story with Randy Weckerly. He's the author of Adam's Miracle. Identifying a miracle is the overarching topic today on Let's Talk Tri-State. So where we left off before the break, Randy, was that you said this is where the real miracle happens. You've been told on the 26th of December, the day after Christmas, you've had a wonderful Christmas meal, the spaghetti and milk, which may seem unconventional, but if you've been following along with the story, that's when Adam could request food, that's what he wanted, and he was then able to have it, and you had that with your family all gathered around, the best Christmas meal ever, and you're told the very next day, well, now he has to be taken somewhere else for more treatment. So here's where we are, Randy, so take it the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'll try to do within this time zone. So we ride in the ambulance the day after Christmas down to RIC in the heart of Chicago, where everybody's shopping. That's where this fabulous institute is. And we check him in, and he's not walked yet. I mean, any type of walking that he would do would be with a belt around his waist.
Right.
So we get down there, and the nurse says, hey, you want to see your accommodations? And he says, sure. So they put a belt around him, stand him up. He walked about 50 yards and said, can't say exactly what he said, but take this flipping belt. I'm going to walk.
Wow.
And a kid was there with a spinal problem and shooting Nerf basketballs, and he went and he shot Nerf basketballs with him for about 10, 15 minutes. The next day he gets up and the doc comes in and says, hey, you want to go shoot real baskets? Well, he was so weak he couldn't throw the ball 4 feet, literally.
Right.
But he says, hey, Dad, aren't we where we have lunch at Christmas time here in Chicago? Yeah, and he's walking great. Now, this is the 27th of December. And so I go and ask the nurse, I said, can we go for a quick walk, go have lunch here at this bistro? And she goes, sure. Went and bought him a parka. Now we're walking a block. The next day after that, his mom comes down. He's still wanting to walk, and he's doing his therapy and all that. He walks for 2 miles to go see a movie at Navy Pier, which is a big situation. Wow. None of this makes any sense. I mean, it's all documented. It makes no sense.
You kind of, I guess you have to be almost like, yes, you're a faith-based person, but Randy, I say this, and so many times in my life, I always say, I've seen too much to not believe, but I always say, all I ever do is ask God to show up. But more often than not, he shows off. And I think that's what you're describing here. Certainly God showed up, but it's like, okay, now you're just showing off.
Well, it made, and it still does today, trust me. Let's go to the bottom line. Yesterday, last 2 days, every day I spend time with my son because now he's a professional golfer trying to get to tour and working out. Mm-hmm. And the goal of this book was to get him home. Remember that.
Right.
So we thought it'd be months down the line. So did everybody else. Everybody went home. I'm just he and his mom. His mom was back for New Year's Eve to be with her husband. And, things were getting relaxed. I wasn't going to leave Adam. It was just, that's the way it was. So New Year's Eve comes and they come in, they say, hey, there's no rehab this weekend. And I said, well, what does that mean? They said, well, you can do whatever you want. I said, well, when do we have to be back? And it's New Year's Eve. And they said, well, 10:30. So I said, well, we'll be back. So I went and got a train ticket and we left downtown. Nobody knew this was going to happen. This is where I can't talk about it. Mm-hmm. But we get him in a cab, get him in a train, get him to the suburb next to where we live. I had my oldest son come pick us up, and we went to the front door where everybody was celebrating New Year's Eve, and
yeah,
we're home. And I still can't talk about how joyous that was, because everybody was inside looking at what they thought was a ghost. And it was the cheerleaders and our friends, and they didn't know we were coming.
Yeah.
They had no idea. And of course, we had to go back. And remember, they said it was going to be 6 months to 2 years. Well, we went back, and 7 days later, we checked out permanently and came home. And of course, he needed rehab, and the school built a great program for him. He played basketball that next fall, became an elite athlete, and became a fantastic golfer. And then in the book, where some people said, well, what about the continuing miracles? Well, we decided this past fall just to go in and let's have the EEG, let's go in and have the MRIs, let's go in and have evaluation, see what the scarring is. When you talk about God taking away his footprint, all of that for no reason, no explanation is gone.
Wow.
And we didn't know that until November. I couldn't write this book, honestly. People had asked me over the years to write the book because it was such a well-documented scenario. And in my life, that big blank check, as of this morning, the reason that you'll see Live Eco Style is that I have a partner out in Hollywood who is Mariah Carey's cousin, Always Carey, his name is. Mm-hmm. But both he and I had we met each other about 7 years ago, and it's all about paying it forward. Everything we're doing right now, I just got off a phone call where we're working on building homes for the homeless and setting up programs for our vets all over the country. And this, again, Mr. Carey and I know that we all have an expiration date in everything that we're doing, because this miracle that happened for me has been so huge an imprint in my life. Live Eco Style, if you look at the tagline, talks about celebrating all the good things in life.
Yeah.
And that's travel, dining, sipping, love, health, all those things. It's all fundamental, and this story that you're hearing is there, but you can sit and see from me is that we want to leave a better footprint. We want to take care of other people, because I've been so blessed to go out, and 2 days ago, went to a concert with Adam and his fiance, went and saw Kenny G. Great time.
There you go.
You never forget. It never leaves me, ever. Not for a minute. I get up every day and have prayer time in the morning, giving thanks. And giving, hopefully, the good Lord will give me as many days as he possibly will to get this mission done, to pay it forward, which we've worked on for all these years, and going to continue to work. We're right now having amazing things come to us that really are unexplainable. There'll be a second book coming out.
Wow. There
are some people that want me to put together the diary of my life, which is really unexplainable, a lot of parts of it. And we're going to attempt to do that. It's not for my ego. It's not for anything. It's just that what has happened, like, for instance, in the world of professional golf, how the book has compelled people, hopefully, to give people hope. Brian Harmon, who is the past professional golfer of the year, his son nearly died in an accident. He lives down in Sea Island, and a friend of his went in to save his son, and unfortunately had a medical episode. Right now is in a coma for 5 or 6 weeks.
Wow.
So I shipped the book down there just to give him hope. Had another professional golfer that called me up when I was writing the book, older gentleman. Again, these are just golfers. It's happenstance in golf, but they knew I was writing this book a year ago. And this gentleman played in the senior tour, called up and said, hey, my daughter's daughter just had a grand mal seizure, and she's in with a coma and blah, blah, blah. And they're telling her really desperate things. And I said, well, this isn't done, but I'll send you the rough transcript. And it gave them hope, and she recovered. And wow. I'm not saying that there's anything mystically great about me. It just is a mental it was my, and I don't even feel sometimes that I have the deepest faith that I should have.
Right.
But I know one thing, I look outside and I see the sunset, and I knew this as a kid that God had to make that. I couldn't explain it. I was privileged to play golf on green grass that I couldn't explain how that grew. I couldn't explain how deer and pheasants would be making my mornings beautiful. I couldn't explain how my grandfather took me out on lakes as a kid, and we fished and had joy, and we come from very, very humble beginnings, but he told me that, just mainly, Randy, leave a better footprint. Just leave a better footprint.
Yeah.
So that's my faith. So thank you for extending
man.
the time to talk about this today.
It's been a pleasure.
Been great.
I think sometimes, Randy, you talked about the friend of yours whose daughter basically was suffering something similar to what Adam went through. I think sometimes we just need to know that the hope is there. We always say, Christ himself said that, and paraphrasing here, but, blessed are you, for you have seen and believe, but blessed are those who have not seen, yet they still believe. And that's where we are, is we haven't seen. Most people haven't seen a miracle. We've heard of different things, but when you know somebody and you can talk to them, and there's such similarities as you just described, it's the I heard the story said once before that a guy's walking down a city sidewalk and he falls into a hole, and people are standing up there and they walk by and they see him, and they say, well, we'll go try to find help, and all the while all these different things people are saying, these platitudes are, he's like, well, that's great, but I need someone to help me. And finally a guy, and there was no way out, and the guy jumps down in the hole with him and says, well, what are you doing? Now there's two of us stuck here. And the guy says, I know the way out. I've been here before. And that's basically what you just described happened, and I think that's so important. We've been talking with Randy Weckerly, author of Adam's Miracle. Certainly, Adam is doing well, Randy, as you described. He's doing great. He's on his way to being a pro golfer. Certainly, we wish him all the best. And he has the biggest cheerleader in the world, I'm sure, in you. And we would, when that second book is done, my goodness, you have an open invitation, Randy, to join us on Let's Talk Tri-State. It has been nothing short of an honor to talk to you today.
Well, I appreciate it. If people want to find the book, it's pretty simple. It's on Amazon.com, just under Adam's Miracle, Barnes & Noble. They can find it.
Okay.
Proceeds from the book goes into our mission. It just basically is that, it's interesting to see what cultures read the book. Over in Japan, it spread like fire. Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But it's a story of faith. It's a story of, hopefully other people can understand that, when I asked to reframe my business, one short topic.
Please.
I had no money. I mean, I was going like, what am I going to do to make a living? My business was stripped away from me, and I had to find a way. I did take a job in retail, but I told the people, I said, hey, I need time to rehab my son. But I knew I was going to be back into entrepreneurism. But then I said, Lord, I'm not going to go out looking for people. Just allow me to have the people. You tell me the people that walk my path, that I can work with them to create a new future. Everybody that works with me, and we don't use the term work, we live life, has been found just by being observant. And I was sitting in a coffee shop 2 weeks ago, and a young girl, beautiful, opened up her laptop in front of me, and she was on Indeed.com, and she was there, and she looked really sweet. And I said, so are you looking for a job? What are you looking for? Well, I needed a new assistant, and and she went to work for me. And the good Lord is all around in my world. I always walk in prayer every minute of the day. And I know I'm not doing enough, but at the end of the day, the good Lord has blessed me, giving me my son. And I hope for everybody reading this book, there's been outcomes that don't come out the way we want, but the book can give you faith and give you a new attitude and give you a new way of looking at things. Don't be hopeless, be hopeful. And be full of spirit, because the good Lord is looking over you every day, and he loves everything about us. The good Lord created us to find love and to be loved. Mm-hmm. Just do the best you can to understand he's there.
There are no coincidences, only convergences. And Randy, this is a convergence. You sharing your story with us, with me specifically. I'm sure many people are going to take a lot away from this story, just as I am. But if no one else does, buddy, I sure did. And I thank you so much for joining us on Let's Talk Tri-State. And we are coming up on the holiday season. It is, kicking off. So I wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and all all the blessings that God could possibly give you. I know you've had the biggest and the best one, but I hope that they certainly continue and that your story continues to bless. Randy, thank you so much. God bless you, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me. Merry Christmas to you too. Bye-bye.
If you'd like to be featured on an upcoming episode of Let's Talk Tri-State, call 717-597-9200 or email letstalk@921thegoat.com.